Here we go. So now we are recording. Clare G Harvey, thank you so much for coming onto my platform. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure.
This has been a long time coming. As you know, I started to vlog about my personal journey with endometriosis last year, actually last summer. And, one of the driving factors behind that decision, as you know, it's not only is it a personal battle that you're going through suffering from endometriosis, it's also having to broach such a sensitive topic, like talking about women's bits and areas that are not, sort of commonplace conversation. And I come from a background, as I think I've alluded to on previous videos, where you don't necessarily divulge your personal affairs. But, such was the compulsion that I felt to share with other women in this situation, that I just had to put that aside. So one, I wanted them to know, just how bad it can get, but not for it to be a doom and gloom, but for them to see that, yes, you may go through a tunnel, what might seem like a dark tunnel, but you can come out of the other side. So yes, I went through the mill, and, I had my annus horribilis, and I had my, very challenging moments, especially when, as a lot of women know, it's very typical for you to go misdiagnosed for years. Sometimes, in some cases, I know women have gone misdiagnosed for a decade, nearly 2 decades. You feel like some kind of freak. You go through the motions. Eventually, you might get somebody who figures out that, yes, you've got endometriosis. You have the surgery, you go through the over-the-counter remedies, and you're still suffering and you're still in pain. So that was part of my story when my doctors told me after my operations that, sorry, Ms. Scott-Sawyer, unfortunately, because there's no cure for your condition, you will have to take painkillers for life. And that's what kind of led rather neatly onto my next chapter, which is when Clare came into the picture, and purely by serendipity, I was introduced to Clare G Harvey. This is going back, gosh, Clare, I was trying to think. I think 2011, 2012.
Yeah, sort of 10-ish years, I think.
It's been about a decade.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a telephone conversation that we had, the first consultation, effectively, because I recall now, it was 2011, I'd been made redundant. And it was a year when everything was literally just going wrong, including the health situation. And so that first consultation I had with Clare was over the phone. And I was quite skeptical. I sometimes refer to myself as skeptical Simone when,
And it's interesting because it usually is, I am usually the last resort, because it's usually been through the mill in terms of not really getting an answer. And simply not to degrade them or denigrate them, but simply they're not trained in finding different ways, maybe more natural ways of solving the problem. And your body, there's something wrong. When there's pain, it's an indication, help, I need some help, there's something not right here. So
absolutely
glad to be at the other end of the phone.
So yeah, I'm pleased I made that call. Of course, I suppose, as with most people who might be watching this, would often think, well, flowers, plants, really? Is that going to turn things around? These are the questions and, comments that I had going around in my head. So yes, without much further ado, welcome again, Clare, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad we managed to make it. We've been wanting to get together, and we've just been so busy ladies. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good. So for those who may not be familiar, Clare G Harvey, who is Clare G Harvey, and what do you do, for how long, and why?
Yeah. Okay, I often ask myself who Clare G Harvey is. I think the best way to maybe give a bit of my history, which is, a lot of people have heard of Edward Batch, of the famous, certainly the rescue remedy and the Batch remedies, which are in Boots and fairly commonplace in the UK and now all over the world. My sort of story with it is that my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, worked with Dr. Batch. She was one of the first ladies, and she was great friends with Nora Weeks, who was like his sort of a companion, as it were. So I remember when I was little going to tea with Nora Weeks. The batch at that time had gone to his ward. He was no longer with us. And there was a conversation to teach me about the flower remedies. So there was obviously some kind of destiny going on, or some sort of transference of some of the knowledge. I must say, when I was younger, I didn't do much with it, though I was trained. I actually was brought up in Uganda, which is a wonderful place. I call it the Garden of Africa. And in a wee little village called Nyondo, right on the foothills of the mountains between Kenya, as we called it then, and Uganda. So that gave me a really, really good grounding in nature, flowers, because it's completely abundant, and the appreciation of that. Because I got malaria and stuff like that, I had to be taken back to England to get better, as it were, and be out of the sort of situation like that, and lived with my grandmother. And this was my grandmother who trained with Nora Weeks and Batch. And my grandfather as well was a Harley Street osteopath, and also trained in acupuncture, which is really, really rare in those days. He trained from a Chinese gentleman in Belgium, and he was really quite well known in his practice at number 1 Harley Street. And I remember sort of going with him occasionally, and grandma occasionally, and they kind of all worked together, which was wonderful. And I've sort of continued on the tradition now, so I'm working a little bit further up Harley Street 103 to 105, but it still feels at home because I'm carrying on the tradition that my grandparents have sort of started in, and they were real innovators. They knew a lot of the pioneers in the healing field. And I've know you know about Montessori, don't you? The Montessori teaching. She was one of the first to be trained by Maria Montessori.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, and for anyone who doesn't know, that's to do with teaching children right at the beginning, and to treat them, to teach them in a very natural way, to stimulate their creativity, or to continue in developing their creativity. So she was looking at all aspects. She was also a naturopath as well. She trained in natural medicines. So all that was sort of passed on to me. So that's sort of my background and the approach. So I've not had a lot of medicines, what I call the allopathic medicines, except quinine for malaria, all right, which didn't do me any good, to be honest with you, because I kept reoccurring. And I had to clean my system from that as well. But my first instinct is to go towards the flowers. And when you think about it, it's not that far removed, because where do we get our aspirin from? Where do we get a lot of our natural medicines from? Concentrations from within a plant. They can't synthesize it unless they know like the ingredients or the pattern that you can actually synthesize or isolate. So a lot of the medicines originated, like digitalis, okay? It's the foxglove. It all comes from nature, right? So in a sense, it's actually taking it back right to the beginning. And the thing I always say with, is a lovely saying from the Aboriginals, and I think they got it right, is where the mind and the emotion goes, the body follows. So it starts stress, emotions, shock, bereavement, any sort of emotion like that, or mental stress, trickles down into the physical. Yeah. Physical is the last place us as human beings feels that there's something that's wrong. It's like our body is like our barometer. Hey, I've got pain. There's something incorrect in the body. I need to go out and find a solution for it. So I like
the body manifests. Effectively, it's like the body manifests what's happening in the mind.
And it usually manifests where there's a weak point. So, it could be a hereditary thing, or hereditary is usually lifestyle, like something like diabetes, something like that is usually because there are, like that's in my family, both sides. So I've been very careful with what I eat, the kind of sugars that I eat. So I'm very careful. So I'm very balanced on my blood sugar levels. Right. So but unless you're aware of it, unless you've been educated in it, unless you've been brought up that way, you won't necessarily know what the signs are. You won't be able to necessarily read what your body's saying to you. And you know, like endometriosis, there's usually some sort of heavy period or something that's happened that mother might have or grandmother might have. There might be something going along down the line, or it just might be to do with diet, emotions as well. And with us girls, anything emotional tends to hit our ladies' bits, okay? And usually we don't, as you say, yeah.
Funnel, right?
Exactly, and we don't talk about it because that's the way we've been brought. That's our private parts as girls. We don't necessarily talk about that. We're not as open as, say, like the Americans, who will tell you everything. Or, you know, I know what the culture's like, having been brought up, and also quite English. We don't talk about those sort of things. So it's, how do you find a solution? What other aspects do you look at that create the situation? Okay, so I like to dive quite deep, as you know. Through the sessions, we find out what is the pebble that's been thrown into the pond. What is it that's creating all the ripples effect? Yeah. So if you clear that pebbles, which could be shock, stress, hereditary pattern, whatever, and the outer ripples is usually when you feel it in the body. And the more one lets that develop, and like that road continually being fed, or the river continually being fed, the worse it's going to get. And much as I appreciate allopathic and drugs and antibiotics, sometimes you need those. So I never say no to that, but you need to know when to use what. And if you can pull it back right to the originating source and cut it off at that level, and heal it and clear it at that level, there's less likely that pattern to start to trickle down into the physical again, because you're clearing off the reason why you've developed that in the first place.
Right.
Go on.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you'll never say no to the conventional drugs as we know it. But I'm just curious, just sticking with the flower essences for the moment. Was there ever an aha moment where, you know, I'm picturing your childhood where you grew up with, you know, all of the natural stuff all around you, the back remedies, etc. Was there ever that aha moment where you'd figured out, okay, this is what flowers and plants and herbs can do, to then working out, right, this is how I can now correct and remedy when there's a misalignment or an imbalance in the body?
I think I've always known it, in the sense that it's almost instinctual with me. I haven't had to learn it. I haven't had to go to a school to learn it. It's almost like a knowledge that I've had for a long time, that I just needed to tune into it. And my grandmother, I used to go around with her, and I would see her giving batch remedies to her patients. And I would see them come again to give another lot of remedies, and I would see the change in people. I would see a change in their energy, in their whole demeanor. They were more positive. You know, some of the things that they were complaining of had disappeared. So I observed from very, very early on that flowers had that effect. And because I'm very much connected with nature, even when I was very, very little, I was always playing with flowers and mixing them and doing things with them. It was like going out in nature and running in the grass when you could, as long as there weren't any trooper ants around, you know, a few things around you had to avoid. Right. But just running in the grass, the morning dew all over my face. Wow. Drinking. So I did it instinctually. Yeah. So it's actually part of who I am. I spent, obviously my grandparents started to train me right from the age of 7, okay? Because I stayed almost a couple of years with them. So my father, he's my father really. My grandfather kind of taught me about the healing, and my grandmother about the flowers, and I would go with her. She even made some of her own. So I go with her, and I could see the process that she was doing in making the flowers as well, making the mother tincture. Yeah. So all this is a memory. But of course, when one's a teenager, you do the opposite.
Of course.
So I went and decided I was going to do a fashion designer, because I've got both my parents are artists. So that was it. St. Martin's going to be a fashion designer, but we go through our Waterloo, we go through things. And there was a moment in my life when my parents were starting up a healing center, and they invited me to come to join them. And I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with it, but in my whole process, I went through divorce and stuff like that. And in my whole process of coming back to myself, I think I was taking Wild Oat, which is about your direction and purpose in life, or opening you up to that. And I took it, and I found myself jumping out of bed thinking these remedies don't work, they didn't do anything, but I'll take it anyway and see what it's about. And I just thought, that's it. I know what I need to be doing. That was my aha moment.
Wow.
I need to be working with the flowers, and I'm a healer. I was literally thought in my head as I jumped out of bed first thing in the morning. And I had
something that maybe just dropped in your spirit.
It's like it opened the doorway, and then it came through that's what that's one of the things I'm supposed to be doing. I always work in 2-year chunks. I never know what else I need to be doing, but the flowers have been totally consistent. And from that came a way of working with them, which was quite different. And from that also came writing the encyclopedia, the first one, and bringing the field together so that everybody was communicating with each other and in one book. So as anybody wanted to, as a practitioner, to train in it, or anybody that wanted to know further and find for themselves, because knowledge for me is power and self-empowerment, and finding out things for yourself is very important. Absolutely. And that's why it's in its 3rd edition now. So it's kept in as a classic. So that was the other thing, is to help unify the field of flower remedies, as well as working in Harley Street and online now as well. Yeah, to actually try and find the right combination or blend of remedies that actually match what the person who's in front of me is looking for, a change and a shift, and almost like a reversal of anything that has manifested itself physically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've talked about the training and obviously early years training that you received. So I'm really keen to understand, because this is a question that I get asked all the time. As you know, I recommend you a lot to friends and family. And I can always see the brain cells grinding, like flowers, really, how does it work? How would you, in a nutshell, describe the methodology behind the way you blend the flowers and the plants to create that unique tincture?
Yeah, well, first off, obviously this is nothing new, right? Let's just give it a base. I've explored, there's about 33 different families of essences from around the world. The Aboriginals were considered the grandfathers. Dr. Batch was considered the father. Okay, the Aboriginals still have it as part of their system today. Right. And they identified the healing qualities within each flower. Okay. When I went to the jungle to find some plants and some flowers and make some other tinctures, and I was talking with the shamans, they kind of, to me, because I was waxing lyrical, of course they knew all about it. So it's like you understand it's a tradition. So you have, and if you've seen some of my bottles. So I have a lot of remedies, and as many as I feel it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. And from that, I can help to find the right combination that suits and fits the person who has a particular physical problem, or emotional, psychological, really doesn't matter what, or it could be even the spiritual problem as well. Mm. Okay. So what I do is I use a form of diagnosis, which is using the pendulum. You can use muscle testing, which takes a reading off the body. Okay. But when you're going through quite a few remedies and you're wanting to find exactly the right one that matches your energy, that matches the imbalance, but also works with the other remedies as well in harmony. So you get a real complete, sort of like an orchestra, a synergistic balance within your blend of remedies. So it's quite an art, really, in terms of choosing. And then because it's something my father taught me and my grandfather taught me, I use the dowsing method. And I always describe that to people as, that you can find water in the desert with those divining rods. I know if you know anybody, a lot of people, have you seen those rods? Or you can use a twig. Yeah.
Are you talking?
Yeah.
Not an oasis. This is some kind of construct, is it?
It's actually, you can use a twig like that, like a twig with an end on it, or you can use some divining rods. And my grandfather did that. That's why I say water, and that he was known to be able to find water in the desert, or water where they, weren't sure where the water table was, because there was no other way of measuring it.
Instinctively find it. Is that what you mean? Whilst in a desert.
It's very accurate.
Okay.
And even, yeah, it's extraordinary. And even I was further down, and I had a clinic down there, and it was a lovely field and stuff. And I saw the water board coming, and I saw them with their pendulums. I said, "Are you looking for water?" He said, "We don't know where the old pipe is. So we're trying to figure out we know dowsing works." I said, "Can I come and join you?" He said, "Yeah, sure, because I douse." Okay. And we mapped it all out. They dug, and there were all the pipes.
And where was it? Which location?
That was down the field, down in a farm where I had a clinic down in Dorchester, near Dorchester. And they came along, and I was very curious, and I actually spotted one was using one of these, and one was using the pendulum.
So the pendulum I'm familiar with, the dowsing.
Yeah.
And what you're describing is
that's the sort of traditional way. Yeah, it's using some twigs, and it's a very, very old traditional way of doing it, particularly for finding water. Okay. When you're using it with finding the correct remedy, flower remedy to match your particular imbalance, then the dowsing is quicker and more efficient. Let's just be very practical. And what it does, nobody exactly knows how it works. They think there's a healing aspect within yourself. There's like an intelligence. It's a bit like when you see a cat or a dog and they're feeling unwell, and they'll go nibble a grass or a herb to make themselves better. It's that instinctual side of you that we lose because we get less and less in touch with ourselves and what's happening. Okay, because we've been educated to put a sticky plaster on it. Okay, a sticky plaster is great, but you also need to help heal underneath. And drugs are great when they're needed, and give yourself time to be able to explore what's causing it underneath. But the sticky plaster, all it does is usually suppresses the symptoms. But that's no good, because it's going to pop up elsewhere. So you've got to clear the roots out.
Absolutely.
So the dowsing. Go on.
Sorry, I interrupted. I was just going to ask, when you use the pendulum, what that involves.
Nobody's really done any sort of scientific stuff on what a pendulum is. We know it's been used for thousands of years, because we've heard of, Egyptians and people like that in the healing field using it. So it's a tradition gone on down. It's people who are healers. It's part of their toolkit. And my grandfather taught me. And what I seem to understand is we have that, as I was saying, about that instinctual side of us. And if you bring yourself as a healer or as a consultant out of the situation, you're really just finding out what does taking a reading off your body, your client's body. And it's that intelligent part of you that we lose sight of, our instinct, our gut feeling that knows what's right for us. And it seems to tap into that frequency, that we know what we need. I call our intelligent self. Left to ourselves, and if our parents had encouraged us to continue to develop that, children often know, but we just get educated out of it. So my feelings, it taps into that. And it's it's interesting. People are always surprised. Even I've done it quite experiments where I said, look, just don't say anything to me. Let's just see what comes up.
Mm.
And that's fun. Where they say, you didn't know that? I didn't tell you that. I said,
Yeah.
I know. You told me that through the blend that you make, because that one is for a migraine, or that one is for reproductive problems. And I would have said, have you got reproductive problems? Yes. And there may even, because I go through a consultation, and there may have been something that one's forgotten to say that you had in the past, and then up it comes. And like, have you had thyroid problems?
Mm.
Oh, yeah, I'm on thyroxine. Okay, that's why you got one to balance the thyroid on that level. So it's quite fun on that level, because it you get a few surprises. But then, and I say, does that make sense to you? He said, yes. You haven't told me anything I don't know.
Mm.
And that's said time and time and time again.
I'm seeing the connection now where you described, going back to earlier on, the Montessori school of thought, which is about allowing children to roam free. And effectively, because, when children are young, they've got unadulterated minds, and you are just open to receive. And sadly, it's as we grow older that society and all the things that happen along the way, life occurring, that we just get clouded, and we lose touch. So we all have that awareness on some level. But I guess when you take it to a different, platform, you have grown up with that. That's all you kind of know in that respect. You have a more heightened sense, if you like, to be able to tap in.
Yes, and I think because I was educated, well, I wasn't educated out of me. It was encouraged from my grandmother right from the beginning. And so, I mean, people would say the old-fashioned, I feel it in my waters.
Yeah.
Yes. The gut. It's all that where something's either not right, or in your heart when something's right or wrong. So it's that kind of feeling that you go, and that kind of frequency that you go with, and it's just a knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And we do know, if we allow ourselves to, we do know how to correct us. The body is extraordinary. It has its own internal messaging. Absolutely. It's just we haven't learned or been educated, or joined up the dots.
Quite. It's going back to that third eye, isn't it? And as you describe it, feeling it in your waters, or I just get this gut feeling.
Yeah.
On a very simplistic level, it's a bit like when you eat a dish that's extremely hot. Instinctively, to either drink some water or drink something creamy. I don't know where that came from, but this is something that we know to just kind of redress that balance.
Exactly. And it's that instinct, and and when you don't think about it, that instinct can come and come into play. Yeah. Because there's no thought, or I've been told this is what I should be doing. The body just acts in a situation like that.
For sure. I mean, I am fascinated by the whole dowsing thing. I'm sure you know. So we've done it a few times. I've been to your clinic where you've lined up all the essential oils, and you've got the quartz, the crystal quartz, and it dangles off. Is it like a gold chain?
Yeah, it's a silver chain. Yeah,
silver chain,
and quartz is very conductive. So it's in watches, it's in all sorts of different things. It's like it's a conductor. It's got those qualities
of allowing you to tap into the frequency. Yeah. So for me, that's one thing. But what I found fascinating the first time I watched you do it is where you'd literally hold the quartz, and just by you thinking whether this essential oil is right for this client or not, it will dangle of its own accord, of its own volition, to the left, to the right, giving you a reading, a yes or a no.
Yeah. Did you want me to show you?
That would be amazing. People would love to see that.
You need me give me a minute and I will get it. Okay. You have to hold it very, very steady. Can you see?
Right. So ladies and gentlemen, here is the dowsing method. So there you have the quartz crystal at the end of a silver chain.
Yeah. I like the pyramid shape.
Pyramid shape, yes.
Trying to hold it very steady. Okay. It's already moving because you can feel the energy. Okay, so each person needs to know what their yes and their no is. So I'm going to ask it, show me my yes, please. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, that's your yes.
Show me now. I'm now asking, show me my no.
Okay.
Okay, that's once clockwise.
From side to side, and you know it went back and forth.
Yeah, it's okay. For me, if I'm asking the question, is this the right remedy for you? It will either say yes, which is that one. For me, it's from the camera, it's probably anti-clockwise. For me, it's clockwise.
Right.
And anti-clockwise is no. And resting like that is, you know, maybe, maybe not.
Right.
So what we do, what we do in a consultation, what I've done with you is I have a whole load of remedies in front of us. I like to turn the bottles around so I don't influence it. So you're just looking at it. Mm-hmm. And I will go along with the pendulum. When you put your finger on top of the bottle, I'll put my finger on and make a connection. And then we'll go, is this one for you? Yes or no? And when we get the yeses, those we pull out. Mm-hmm. And then we put them in order within a line. And from that, we can see where your pebble is that we need to clear, and what are the ripples, what's created the whole situation that's led you to where you are now. On what level? It could be a physical level, it could be an emotional level, it could be a combination of the whole lot. It usually is. And what we find is you may have your end result may be migraines, okay, or reproductive problems. But the way you got there is unique to you. And that's the fun bit, because each person is completely unique, and tailor making them is the key. And that's the art. Because there may be 4 or 5 different remedies for a migraine, but which one is most suited to you and which works with all the other ones around? So they're working in a very nice orchestrated manner to clear that underlying pattern, so that you're no longer being dictated to with patterns, emotions, everything that's happened within the past, trauma or anything in the past. If you clear that up, the body has an extraordinary ability to heal itself, has an extraordinary intelligence. And that is what the flower remedies are working with, is that intelligence. And I don't know with you, I know that I've watched you develop. You're much, much closer and more in touch with your body, with the flower remedies. And you're more aware of when things are out of balance. And then you will say, hey, I need some remedies, or I'm fine, or you will look for something else, because it's not exclusive, it's inclusive of other things that would help along the way.
I find it absolutely fascinating. I really do. And I guess, is it something that you find, is it something that you apply with each and every client, or are there certain clients whereby you can instinctively work out what they need, what flowers, what essential oils, without having to resort to dowsing?
Yeah, I can, yes. I mean, often I know what they need, but it's how do I put this? Sometimes there's one little one you may not be totally sure about, and you want that to come into the story. Yes, obviously I've developed those capacities, like my grandfather and grandmother, and it's sort of come on down the line to me. So that's where I use it to the benefit of somebody who comes for rebalancing, or to be able to take charge and feel empowered that they can go out and they're fine, they know what they need to do. So yeah, it's without giving too much away.
No, that's fine. I mean, it kind of takes us neatly on to the next question I had in mind, which was on your website. I know you describe yourself as a modern day alchemist and a flower shaman. I suppose we've touched a bit on the alchemy side of things, because what you do is, by its nature, unique. And I totally get it on that level, in that we're all walking different, paths on our journey. So the reason why I might have endometriosis will probably differ to somebody else. And hence you trying to find a bespoke way of treating that person. But in terms of where you describe yourself as a flower shaman, shamanism, that again, that's another fairly misconstrued term, if you like. It will mean different things.
It's another name for it's the South American, Native American way for a medicine person.
Yeah. Does it originate from Peru? Or?
Yeah, it actually was a name that the shamans gave me when I was saying, do you know about flower remedies? And they kind of raised their eyebrows and they said, well, Claire, you're a flower shaman. So I thought that was very sweet. So
it's a message you kind of got, you heard it?
No, they actually told me, you know, you're a flower shaman. Literally the shamans that I was with a group of shamans and doctors. And when I was, as I said, when I was trying to tell them all about flower remedies, of course they knew all about it. They just said, well, Claire, you are a flower shaman, you know, and they said, yeah, no, I'm right. It sort of fits because I spent quite a lot of time in Peru and in the jungle and the rainforests, not only there, but also in Thailand and different places, looking for quite unique flowers and stuff like that, and to make the mother tincture over there, because that's what I do. I make the tincture over there and bring it back, okay? Because it's very important. The flower medicine that you get comes from its roots, you know, because it has the effect. It's no point in making it in your greenhouse or somewhere like that, or in, you know, an orchid in your house. It's much better where it's rooted, where it grows. It's absorbed the energy and the sort of the whole ambiance of, say, like the jungle. You get a very different medicine or a very different feeling and frequency from one made in the jungle as you do one made in your house, you know, which you could make in your house. Yeah. So it's something. I think also what would quite be good to actually make a differentiation is that there are essential oils and they are flower remedies. Yeah. Okay, essential oils, because people often don't quite know which is what. Essential oils it's the oil of the plant, and they go through a process of, they go through a sort of process in order to obtain the oil of the flower. Whereas a flower remedy is something quite different. In the sense that, again, this is an ancient art. Literally, most of the indigenous people of the world have them, or know of them, or still have them, and still use them. So what they noticed was the first morning dew that I used to drink and put on my face, that was potentized by the sun, had an extraordinary effect, and each flower had a different effect. So what they did, they thought, okay, there's something going on here. Particularly Aboriginals understood it. The flowers has a certain energy. Even when you smell it, even when you look at it, it lifts your spirits, okay? Flowers are what we give for somebody who's not well. We go to hospital, we say something, you know, I love you, or, you know, whatever, with a bunch of flowers. And it's always flowers. It could be chocolates, but it's usually always flowers. Yeah. And that's because people instinctually know there's something about flowers that has a healing effect. Now, the ancient peoples were much more in touch with themselves than we are today. So they noticed that each particular flower had a different effect on their bodies and on their mood. So they said, right, okay, let's get a bunch of flowers. Let's actually put it in spring water and potentize it by the sun, because there's something gets transferred to the water, because they've now discovered that water holds the memory. It's almost like a recorder. And we are made up, I think it's 83% water. So that is liquid medicine, or liquid frequency, or the healing energy would vibe with us, would resonate with us. Yeah. And of course, then they'd already discovered alcohol. So they needed something to fix it, to sort of keep it stable. So they used a little bit of alcohol with it. To preserve it. And that's how the flower remedies bloomed, grew, were discovered. Right. And that tradition has not changed since the Egyptian times, since beyond. And there are some records of using flowers, the flower water, especially Thailand, Indonesia, China, also Egypt, the Aboriginals, Peru, places that I'd been. I wasn't telling them anything new.
So did I. We just had to tap into it.
Yeah.
So I mean, just to kind of complete the understanding of shamanism, when somebody asks you, you describe yourself as a flower shaman, where does we know that in South America it's something that dates back centuries, but where does it originate from?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it originates from. It each place, like, what would they call they would call them a medicine man in Africa, right? Okay.
You have them.
Could be good or bad medicine. We want the good ones. Each place, there's also in different parts of, like, Russian medicine men. So it really is a person that works for healing, okay, and may use different tools. Like the shaman might use smudge, might use different tools that they have naturally around them. And they might use, they might use some of the herbs, that they find in the jungle. They showed me a lot of very interesting ones in the jungle.
What's the smudge you referred to, Claire?
Mm-hmm.
What smudge you referred to just now?
Smudge is sage, which they use to clear energy, clear bad spirits, that sort of thing. There's also flower water they use to sprinkle on you to clear the energy and clear bad spirits. Mm-hmm. So it's like an old-fashioned ancient doctor. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, you can even say the doctors we have today are shamans, but yeah, I wish they were a bit more rounded, that they knew about the ancient stuff as well as the modern stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's also what I like about the Chinese, that if you have a problem, the barefoot doctor only got paid if you were well. So you paid your doctor, your barefoot doctor, to keep you well. If you were ill, he didn't get paid. I love that way round of doing things. Wow. Because that's the right way round, because Big Pharma's got it wrong on the sense, because, it's not about money, it's about finding a remedy. Yeah. And therefore they have to work, because they won't get food on their table, because they won't get paid. That's the correct way. So if the doctors today, and there are more and more of it, I have actually trained nurses and doctors in the art of flower remedies. And if more of them understood the emotional aspect,
absolutely,
they would have a much better repertoire. And you can actually stop things developing where you need hard drugs.
Prevention is better than cure, right?
Yeah, that's how it should be. And I was just saying, in China, what they do, if you've got an illness or something, you would have an acupuncturist or a Chinese herbalist and a medical doctor together discussing the case. So they would decide between them what's the best route to take. Mm-hmm. Ideal situation.
Like you say, it's just unfortunate we have a system whereby, in the traditional sense, if being a doctor, it's frowned upon. I had a very dear uncle. I don't know if I've mentioned him to you before. He was a consultant neurosurgeon who he was one of those rare breeds who happened to know about every aspect of the human body. So he was a general surgeon. Here in this country, as you know, we have general practitioners, and of course, they have an idea about everything. But he specialized in the brain, but could operate on any other part of the body. And I spent some time with him over Christmas, and I did a video, where we talked about endometriosis. And he's also somebody who was, a huge advocate for natural remedies. Brilliant. So, from way back when, he had, recommended some natural leaves for mum and myself. It helps mum with her high blood pressure, for instance, and bitter leaves. And there's a cola nut that comes from that plant called the bitter cola that is really good for your immune system. And, he's he's an aberration. It's not typical to have a doctor like that who embraces what conventional medicine can do. And obviously, if you have a situation where, you've got cancer of the brain, for instance, you need to go in and, depending, operate and make that person well as quickly as possible. And then maybe look to to keep them well through a combination of
that's where I don't rule out, because I do have people who have those kind of problems. But what you do is there are natural medicines that you can do as well in combination. That if yes, maybe they need an operation. Okay, maybe it's got to the stage where you have to be quite radical, but at the same time, you support the immune system. There are herbs, like you're saying, around to support the immune system. But the other very, very important thing, particularly with cancer, is that you clear the mindset. You clear the emotional triggers, okay, which could be stress, which could be trauma, could be somebody dying that you loved. It could be anything in childhood that creates the body, because cancer is the body eating itself, basically destroying itself. So if you can clear the initial trauma, you've got a much more successful outcome in terms of, one, it not repeating itself because the pattern's no longer there.
Yeah.
And to continue to go on, use it as a learning curve, as it were, and then move on to much, much better health. And it's very interesting. There's a New Hope clinic in, I don't know if it still exists, but it's just in New Mexico. And there's a Dr. Contralis that I met maybe 15, 20 years ago. And he was talking about, unless you clear the mindset in terms of cancer situations, you could get a repeat. So, and I piped up and said, well, what do you use? He said, I use flower remedies. Well, I said, I think we need to have a conversation. I was delighted. So he had come over to do a lecture, which I was invited to. And I was one of the authors. I couldn't help piping up because I wanted to know what he did. Yeah. He said, yeah, very successfully. And we do find that people who do take a course of flower remedies and get to the root of the problem, they don't have to go down that same road again. And they don't have to repeat the pattern.
Yeah.
That's where it works beautifully together. Yeah. That's why I never say no. It's the right medicine, the right moment at the right time, whether it's natural, whether it's allopathic, whether it's something else, whether you need to clear your heavy metals. That's again another situation that we're having to deal with as well, that I'm exploring at the moment. Mm-hmm. And, if you clear your heavy metals like lead, mercury, a lot of us got it in our mouths, and glycosates, which is Roundup, weed killer that we get on all our crops and stuff like that, all the lead from the petrol and from the diesel that we breathe in when we're living in, which also can be, it can contribute to endometriosis, okay? Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of conditions that the heavy metals we're exposed to can create. So that's another area that I'm also looking at to go with the flower remedies, but you've also got to clear the emotional aspect as well. Absolutely. Not only physical toxicity, but emotional, mental toxicity, which could be trauma. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I like that point you make about the mindset. I mean, because that's really the foundation, the base. We spoke about that earlier on, didn't we? Where a lot of it starts up here. Yeah. Yes, it could have come through the generations as well. But I think unless you get that foundation right, everything else will it won't come to fruition, because it's just there's nothing there on which it can stand. No. If that makes sense.
Exactly. That's very well put. Yeah. It is the key. It is the key to get to the root of the problem, and that's what I love to do, is get to the root of things. Definitely. And so you don't have to go down that road. Nothing's set in stone. You can clear it. You just need to go to where somebody who's and there are people, I've trained people, there are other people who are having the same approach, but it is the holistic approach, which might include allopathic drugs. It's not ruled out. Right. Because if you just have one paradigm, then that's not looking at what the body needs. The body may need a combination, and that's the uniqueness of the body. We do need, it's like creating an orchestra and creating a piece of music, because we are all, and what works for one might not work for the other, but you've got to look and see what actually creates the situation so the body can start to heal itself, which it will do. It's extraordinary. We have our, internal medicine that is able to overcome a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I guess the constant researching, and obviously with you having that innate ability, being able to just to get in tune, get into that zone, it's a bit like a conductor just trying to work out literally how do we get the harmony going? How do we
exactly.
make them all work together for good?
Yeah, exactly. And I am asked to make, because I'm a formulator as well. So I am asked to do special formulations, which would be more like a generic, but it'll have everything in it that I've just developed some body organ targeted remedy based on Chinese medicine using the flowers. So if you approach that, I'm very liverish, I've got liver gallbladder, and there's a problem with my liver. If you take that remedy, it includes being angry and frustrated and various things like that. So it's that crossover between the mind and body,
Mm-hmm.
where the mind and emotions cross over into the body. So you can actually treat it that way, as well as treating the meridians. So that's quite an exciting way to approach it. It's bringing in acupuncture, the Chinese medicine approach. And a lot of us say, oh, I'm feeling a bit liverish, or, I've got my thyroid problems, because we are now educated in thinking about organs of the body more than our emotions.
Indeed, and how they're all connected.
And then it's quite a good learning curve, because then you realize I've got one for adrenals and stress, and we know that our adrenals get exhausted when we're stressed by that. So there's a blend for that.
Yeah.
There's one for post-traumatic stress, one's for kidney, bladder. There's all sorts of hormones. There's a blend for hormones, which is in your mixes. So ovaries and hormones. So, and there's one in there, and these using the Aboriginal range, there's one in there which is called the she oak. When you look at it, you can see its signature. It actually looks like an ovary. And it's what the Aboriginal women use for all their hormonal problems.
Mm.
So, it's got the traditional and then some, because it's becoming a remedy as well. Mm. So it has everything you do as a herbal, or, as, you take, and eat, but also got extra bits, the emotional, psychological aspects of it as well. Yeah. So it's understanding that whole dynamic between the mind and the emotions and the effect on the body, how they affect each other, or they're symbiotic.
Indeed. And that's what I've liked about your work, because over the years, obviously, I've become quite familiar with your method, and the fact that you're always taking it to another level. So yes, it's good to have the basis, the foundation, which is what you grew up with, that knowledge. But there's a constant strive, isn't there, between the traditional and the contemporary. So back then, they may not have been as sophisticated, for instance, when it comes to, maybe articulating that you need to balance mind, body. Yeah. It would have been there, I guess. But these days, we're a lot more aware, aren't we, about mind, body, soul balance.
And that's great, because I think the complementary medicine area, the growth of it, because it's grown exponentially, especially over here. And, that's great, because it gives people an awareness that there's other ways of approaching it, not to exclude anything. It's not alternative. I don't like the word alternative. It's complementary. Yeah. Everything should, it's what we need ourselves personally in terms of our own uniqueness. So that's very important. And if you're working in a field like this, it's almost the demands of what we're going through, the demands of the time, and working with people closely, which I do, you're always looking for something that's actually going to hit the mark. Yeah. So whether it's, I've just discovered some, as I said, something that actually, it's a zeolite, a special form of a zeolite that actually clears the toxins, and it can be proved to see. Look at the when you do a urine analysis, you can see before and afterwards. You can see the mercury going, you can see the lead going. I love it when
what zeolites are, for those who might not be familiar with that.
The zeolite is a form of crystal, and it's found, it's produced by volcanic activity when it meets the sea. And there are, just like you do diamond mines and various stones and Amazonite and amethyst, you see groups of them. There's a particular area where it's quite unique, and it's this particular form which they've made it into a liquid, which has the ability to just, it's got a little cage-like structure, and you've got to get the size right, and you've got to clean it because it has this sort of negative charge. It actually draws toxicity to it. So in fact, you can actually, it can bring heavy metals, viruses, bacteria, absorbed into the cage, so it is passed through the body naturally. Quite extraordinary stuff.
It is.
I've known about it for a while, but it's finding the Rolls Royce of it that does the job, and that you have the actual clinical backup of it, which is what I love. I love that side of stuff, to actually see it does what it says on the bottle, and that's very important. So I like, go on.
No, just to be clear, you spoke about the root slate earlier on. Is that the same thing?
Slate.
Yeah, root slate.
That is what I'm talking about. It's a form of
the zeolite is the generic term.
It's the generic, it's acylic acid. Orthoacylic acid is this particular form, and it has this amazing action. And I've actually seen the results of it before and afters, and also when somebody's been smoking, maybe 10 minutes taking it, you can do the live blood analysis, and you can see the before and after quite different, quite. So quite extraordinary things. This is where I love where, science is matching up with nature on that level. And the other thing about the zeolite, which people don't realize, probably a lot of us remember Chernobyl and the fallout.
Yeah.
And what they did, they used crushed zeolite, shed those of it on the actual site to reduce radiation.
That Chernobyl disaster in the 1980s.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting.
And
it's very interesting. You often get, we think, oh, it's tiny little flowers are not going to be doing that. Reminds me of a study that the Green Cross Medical Code did with a combination called Electro Guard, that was done with a combination of flower remedies, and they gave it to children who had effective radiation sickness, all the symptoms of it, and it was in the system where they measured it. What they did, they took 100 children, they gave placebo, half the blend and half the placebo. The ones that had the blend reduced radiation in their system by 43%, which they never had anything to do that. That is a combination of flower remedies. That's measured. I've got the study, okay? Because when everybody says, oh, it's just placebo, I said, well, sorry.
Here are the facts.
Study. And then they said, oh my God, this works. So they stopped the study and gave the other children the placebo it, because they couldn't let the other ones have it reduced and all their symptoms are beginning to dissipate.
Yeah.
And not give it to the other children. And they repeated it, and the same thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
So they did it twice. And the other thing about remedies, they work beautifully on animals and children, babies, racehorses. I've treated racehorses.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I tell you, I've been all around.
Literally around the houses and the barns.
Yeah. So I love that. I love the challenges and different, I mean, you name it, I've treated it in terms of different animals. It works beautifully.
It's a whole
different human beings. Trying to think, 25 years, 30 years practice.
And I can imagine the sense of gratification you must get when you see the change, the mass improvement.
It is usually it's a 360-degree change, and I'm always surprised because I never take anything for granted, and that's keeps me interested as well, because I'm the kind of personality who would probably I want to be a fashion designer, so I'm the kind of person that would probably get a bit bored if it was the same old thing, but I love the challenge to see, and also to be able to see it working.
Progression.
Yeah, definite progression. And then to see what comes in, fits in with it, to explore what fits in with it, that is coming out nowadays. Some extraordinary medicines, natural medicines being discovered and rediscovered now. So how they bring in to the party, as it were, to help to complete the healing, so people actually can heal themselves by using these natural remedies.
Yeah.
Like, I'm delighted when somebody says, I'm fine, I'm signed off now. I said, come back when you need me. Fine.
Absolutely.
And there might be quite a few years later, and say, Claire, I need a blend, please. I said, okay, let's take it from here.
Yeah, for sure. And perhaps when you talk about the healing, I remember one thing that a lot of the questions I tend to get is, how long would it take, and what are the side effects? So I know that there is a thing whereby, because the body, the system has to obviously clean itself, it has to go through that process first before it can literally start to work on the actual issue, the condition. Is it retracing, it's called, if I remember right?
Yeah, retracing. Yeah, I would. It takes much less time. My answer is always than it did to build up. So much less time to clear or adjust than it does to build up. Everybody's unique. I myself don't like going through detoxes. Mm-hmm. So I think, now what else can I put in there to soften it? And what I've noticed, if you get the actual blend absolutely spot on, and that's what, say, Simone's body has said she wants, okay, it'll bring maybe something for the liver to stop any kind of detox. It'll bring something else in, just so it's a balance. And it's not, see, in a sort of natural process, what you don't want is to go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Indeed. You want to go 3 steps forward, maybe another 2, then another 3. And I like to make sure the blends have within it something that allows you to keep on trucking, so that you're not going to second guess yourself, self-sabotage yourself, which we can often do, especially when there's a detox going on and you think, oh God, I can't handle this. Indeed. So within the blend is also in my mindset when I'm doing it for people that in the blend, we need something that's not going to allow a sort of pushback. Okay. So normally there's very little side effects.
Excellent.
And if there isn't, there's always the detox remedy, or something that comes in that can use in between, or it's bringing up a lot of shock. There's a remedy of trauma. So I have created in-betweenies, stuff that you can take as often as you like during the day, but your course will be in morning and evening.
So it all works in synergy.
Yeah.
Claire, honestly, I can talk to you all day about this stuff. I find it fascinating.
You ask me questions because I never know what I'm going to say, but it's lovely to have the in-depth questions, because people don't normally ask me as in-depth ones as you do, which is
really? Well,
right.
That's good to know. I mean, it's, as you say, information is key, and knowledge, it's not so much about acquiring the knowledge, but it's then what you do with it. So my intention obviously is to put it out there, and it's for people to make of it what they may. And, you either decide. Life's about choices. That's always been my approach. And you choose to either, sort of open the mind and try something new and different, do your research, independent research, and of course, take it from there.
Yeah, and I would add, it is about taking one's power back for oneself, because that's the key. And that's what I love about the remedies. They allow you to be empowered about your health, that you can make the right choices and trust your choices. And that's, I noticed always with the remedies, they help you to trust yourself, trust your intuition, to know where to go, what to do to keep yourself in balance, given everything that we are thrown at today.
Quite. And it's not difficult to see how that would happen. 21st century living is very different to 12th century living.
Years ago, and 100 years ago, when Batch first did the remedies. So that's why there's a whole explosion, and they really are coming into their own. There's a whole explosion of blossoming of remedies, of different people working with them and discovering them and using them. So it's a real quiet revolution that's going on. And it's amazing to see, especially the time that I've been working with them or doing my job. Hopefully
things have come a long way, huh?
A long way. Yeah, a long way.
That's a nice fitting point to sort of wrap things up. I suppose the evolution, the revolution of what you do. Looking on your website, I saw you mentioned some new products that are coming. And I thought I'll, sneak a question in there about, you talk about your Nubian, Egyptian and African essences. That got
Yes.
picked up.
I've-
Being the African queen that I am.
yes. My heart's in Africa for sure. Absolutely. So much so they asked me what tribe I came from when I went back, because all my hand gestures and everything just recognized. It was really funny. I used to think I'm wrong skin color. This is a too light. So, very much.
So it gets a bit more sun, I guess.
Yeah, that's where my heart is. Yes, Nubian Essences will be coming out very soon. It's actually going to be a combination of African and Egyptian, because originally Nubian pharaohs, all that actually were before Egypt. Okay. And Nubia was quite expanded. I think it's further than has been recorded. So I'll bring out those two, that set first, and it'll be very interesting. The ones from Uganda were, because that's the source of the Nile. So it's like the rock water from Dr. Batch. It's the source of the Nile, and also the Sippy Falls, the 3 waterfalls, and then Munchausen Falls as well, or Munchausen Falls, I think it's called. Yeah, it all goes up, because the Nile is the only river that goes up north.
Yes.
It goes right the way up. So, and Gandhi I didn't realize that he had his statue. He had his things scattered in the source of the Nile. I had no clue.
Gandhi, I thought it was the Ganges.
No, he had something in the Ganges, but he also had it. There's a statue of him in, at the source of the Nile. And I thought, what are you doing there? A picture of me with yeah. And they told me, he had it in the Ganges, but he also had it at the source of the Nile.
Right. That is very interesting stuff.
Ginger, which is at the source.
So you cut out there slightly. Something about ginger?
Ginger is the township where the source of the Nile is in Uganda. Okay.
That would be a fascinating product to watch out for.
Yeah. So, and then it's with the Egyptian ones as well. So that's going to combine together. And then I hope at some point I will go to what used to be called Nubia. So that's a trip to come.
Delving into civilization.
I love that. Yes. Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be.
Claire, it's been fabulous. I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add in conclusion.
I think, I think what I said, yes, it is about empowering yourself. It is about keeping your mind open, as you said, keep exploring, keep pushing the edges. Certainly, our wealth is our health. There's no two ways about that. And also to remember where the mind and emotions are, the body follows. So it's like the body's the last place things get recorded, the mind and emotions, which is why it's very important to keep your mind healthy, to try and detoxify, to keep it clear and clean, in that energetic, which is why we think positive thoughts. That's very important. And there is a remedy called positive change, which is that's a really important one for this time. Is you could go down with everything that's going on, but how do you change it up? How do you keep yourself positive in that good positive frame of mind, so that you can rise with the challenges and not go down with them, because a lot of people are at the moment. So that would be my my thought for the day, as it were. So yeah,
and this is what resonates with me, because being a person of faith and being in touch with my spiritual side and understanding that we were all created beautifully in his image, I guess it's just appreciating that he was a creator. And if you imagine this master of the universe who thought the things he wanted to have come into being, and it starts with that. So if we are also made in his image, it always starts with the mental, with the spiritual, and that is how we start to create as men. So when you look at, I don't know, this glass, way back when, it would have been somebody who thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a receptacle that makes it easier for me to drink without having to go to the well, or rather the lake, and maybe lap it up like, the animals do, or you scoop with the hands. And this is it. That's a very simple kind of analogy, but I see it as basic as that. If you get that right, you can start to create, you can start to get in tune, and you will find instinctively in there, what the tools are that you need.
100%. And I always see, and in even the I think it's the Aboriginals say that God sprinkled the earth with flowers. And for me, I have a very strong faith as well, have a very strong connection. For me, that's what it's about. It's that connection with the divine. That's who we are. It's our connection. And no, none of us are perfect. That's why we come here to learn, okay? But it's connecting with that God spark, whatever you want to call it, that God connection. And flowers, that's where they're from. Yeah. That's 100% where they're from, and they're here for us to reconnect.
Yeah,
with our
absolutely. God put us on this
deeper selves, our soul, whatever you want to call it, and our God connection. There isn't anything else, is there? Let's be honest.
There isn't what, sorry?
There isn't anything else but that. That's what makes us unique.
Quite. And when you think about the fact that we are essentially spiritual beings, just so happen to be having a human experience. Yeah. If you have that there at the forefront of your mind, I think then slowly but surely you can start to go back and realize that, well, yeah, it's actually there all along. So what you're doing is no different to, what somebody else like me could achieve or do if I just put myself in that frame of mind. Yeah. And, put myself in that environment, say, so I can tap into the knowledge.
The flowers are there to remind us of that. That's what they're there for, to clear all the extraneous stuff that we've gathered to learn, but then knowing we have to come back to that. Yeah. That's what they're on the planet for.
Unlearning. It's an unlearning process, isn't it?
Unlearning in order to connect. And also, you're right, when I realized that I was actually a spirit with a body and not a body with a spirit, that completely changed my whole outlook on life. That put it all in perspective, and that is, that we are greater than what we. And
that's the journey.
Yeah,
that's the journey, and it's been fascinating for me as well, because when I first started to use your tinctures, I wasn't so grounded and as connected and in tune with that whole body spirit thing as I am now, and it really has been a journey. I suppose the health for me was my awakening moment, which obviously alerted me to the fact that I needed to do something. Our body manifesting illness is its alarm system telling us attention needed. And obviously, as I delved deeper into that, I started to realize that actually I'm missing something on a much deeper level, on a spiritual level, which is how I then got, much closer to my faith. And it's fascinating when you start to join up all the dots, when you know that you have all the answers. You really do. It's all within.
Exactly.
It's just straight so far down the line that we forget.
It's not there. It's here. And that is, bottom line, is what the flowers are about. They are reminding us that that's who we are. We are, and that's also where we're all connected as well. It's our own unique spark of God connection, but also we all have it, and we're all connected. And if we stay within that space, the world would be a very different place. There's hope.
There is. We can't help but hope, because that's all there is.
Exactly. And I think the more people realize that, the more it's going to change the energy and the frequency, and, it's also the power of prayer, which is very important and has an extraordinary effect, whether you call it prayer or meditation or your connection, whatever, it is extraordinary and has extraordinary healing effect as well. So
I think it's understanding that the power behind coming back to source.
Yeah.
Back to source and finding your resource.
Yeah. Yeah. Your resource in order to come back to the source. Love it. There you go.
Sure, that's essentially what it is. It sounds simple, you know, we have a conversation and we can see how this is all just flowing because this is how it was meant to be. And like you say, we can only hope and pray that the word gets out there and people understand. Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think people will
open up and just take it in.
Yeah, and just see. Well, we can say what we, you know, we can only say what we feel within our hearts, and you know, people will resonate or not, as you say.
Indeed, indeed. I see you've got your is that the third version of your encyclopedia there?
Oh yeah, I was actually going to see if I could lean on. Yeah, it's the first version. No, it's not, sorry, it's the third version. It's the updated version. Yeah. And because as I said, the field is continuously moving and growing. Excuse me. And there's more experiments, there's more research done on it, and so there were 300 more pages I had to put in. Oh, wow. So it's just gone into paperback because they sold the hardback, which is great, and hopefully they'll keep it in. So this when did I start? 10 more than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the first one came in, and then I've just allowed it to develop, so much so that they've done a fabulous job. Great job. So I'm very pleased with it, and it's gone into paperback, so it's cheaper.
Well, yeah, for sure. And I suppose that goes into the detail of, you know, what we've been talking about, but obviously a much more
much more depth
version, yeah. Much more in-depth version. So for people who are interested, they
can
look. Excellent. Have a look. And finally, Claire, what's the best way of people connecting with you? Would that be?
So the website is www.flowersense, spelled sense.co.uk. And if you want to, yeah, if you want to be in contact with me or ask me questions, my contact details on there, where it says consultations with Claire. So please do. Anyone who's got any queries or anything like that, happy to help.
Yeah. And of course, no question too big or small, no ailment or condition too, you know, unusual or beyond your remit.
Believe me, I've seen the lot. I have really seen the lot, yeah. And I love a challenge.
Okay. Excellent.
Okay.
Wonderful. Claire, thank you so much. It was a fascinating discussion that we've just had. Long time coming.
So I'm glad we did it. So bless your heart for creating the platform as well. And bless you. I love what you're doing. So fabulous.
Wonderful. You're very kind. You're very kind. Okay. Well, on that note, I will end the recording. And yes, I hope you guys who get to see this video are enriched and, more importantly, empowered as much as I was. I think there's a lot to be said for, you know, I would put my hands up and say there was a time when, you know, my vision was maybe a little bit insular. And unfortunately, sometimes it takes going through a crisis to think, actually, maybe it's time for me to just broaden my outlook a little bit. And yeah, hence the vlogging, and hence me bringing you this video. So I hope it works. Enjoy. Over and out. Thank you.
Good.